So how much might the Twins sell at the upcoming trade deadline? What do they need to do in order for them to be successful over the next week? There's kind of two options here. The Twins can kind of retool for 2026 by selling off their expiring deals. And earlier this week, John Heyman of the New York Post reported that that is exactly what they are trying to do. But there's no secret that the most valuable names on their roster are Joe Ryan, Joan Duran, and Griffin Jax. And so if the Twins do decide to be a little bit more of an aggressive sell and maybe rebuild for a 2027-2028 timeframe, then those three names could very well be dealt. So we're going to explore both options and what it would look like for the Twins to be successful with both of those options. But we're going to start with the retooling option just because that's the one that's been reported. And honestly, that's the one that in my gut, I feel is more likely to happen. I think the front office generally believes in this core, and I think that they are looking to compete in 2026 and just kind of roll it back and make sure that they have the tools that they need to be successful next season. And so the names that they will be looking to shed at the deadline for sure are going to be outfielder Harrison Bader, utility Willie Castro, and reliever Danny Coulombe. Some other names of expiring deals include Christian Vazquez. He comes with a bigger price tag, especially considering the production, but there is a market for starting catchers, just catchers in general, whether it be the Boston Red Sox or the San Diego Padres. Another expiring contract is Chris Paddock. He hasn't been great this season, but he is a starting pitcher who could fill in the back end of a rotation for a playoff push. And so while the production hasn't been there, the starting pitcher market might be a little bit thin, and so you could actually get something for the Sheriff. And then, of course, we have Ty France. He has been too much of a negative player that no teams are going to come kicking down the doors for a Ty France. And so you're really looking at the first three names I mentioned, and that was Castro, Bader, and Coulombe as the expiring deals that they could get. And so assuming that on August 1st, none of those players are on the roster, what would it take for the Twins to be successful over the next week? And again, if they are retooling for 2026, then I want them to try and acquire players that could potentially impact 2026. Now, of those three players, I think Willie Castro, just because of his versatility and his production, probably brings the most value. Now, we're not going to get any game-changing players for Willie Castro, but I think we could get a really good depth piece, whether it's a reliever, a bench bat, something like that that could help in 2026. Ultimately, if Castro is no longer on this team in 2026, we're going to need to fill that hole with a player of his ilk. And we don't necessarily have anyone that fits that mold within the Twins organization. We have kind of this bulk of infielders like Luke Keeschel, Royce Lewis, Jose Miranda, Eddie Julien, Brooks Lee, that all have a spot on this roster, but it's kind of unclear how those players are going to fit. Brooks Lee has struggled. Royce has struggled, although he's hot right now. Luke Keeschel, in a very, very small sample, was successful before he was injured. And of course, Jose Miranda and Eddie Julien, at this point, I just don't know that they're going to be factors. Especially Miranda has continued to struggle with the Saints, and then Julien has done well with the Saints, but he doesn't have the glove to be that versatile player. And so for the Twins to be successful, when they are trying to flip one of these expiring contracts and looking to retool in 2026, I want them to be acquiring players who could potentially impact the 2026 roster. Now, those players may not be at the major league level right now. They could be down in AAA. And again, we're not looking at somebody who's going to be a high impact player. I'm simply looking for them to acquire some depth pieces in exchange for Bader, Castro, and Danny Coulombe. So kind of a one-to-one flip. If Bader is gone, we're going to need a fourth outfielder again next year. And so maybe acquiring somebody who is controllable in 2026, who kind of has a fourth outfielder type role this year. Again, within the Twins system, Austin Martin could potentially fill that role, but he's down with the Saints for a reason. He hasn't been able to produce at that level for the big league club, so we can't really count on that going into 2026. Again, Danny Coulomb, he's been an elite lefty reliever out of the bullpen, specifically against lefties. And so again, if he's not in the Twins bullpen for 2026, then we're going to have to find somebody who can fill that gap. And so trying to replace Coulomb with somebody who probably won't be quite as effective, but is maybe controllable through next year, would be something that I would look for the Twins to do. Now, I think there is a route for them to trade Duran or Jax and still remain competitive in 2026. In fact, Alden Gonzalez of ESPN reported earlier today, or yesterday, excuse me, that he does get the sense that one of those two names will be moved. Now, the Twins are reportedly asking for at least multiple top 100 prospects for Duran and for Jax. I don't know that anybody's going to pay that price tag, but they're just doing their due diligence, and good on them for starting at the top. If they need to come down a little bit from that ask, that's okay, but you might as well start with being aggressive and then go down from there. That makes things a little bit easier. And so just generally speaking, if the Twins decide that they want to retool for 2026, then I think for this trade deadline to be successful, they really need to look at adding players who can impact the 2026 team by shedding some of these expiring deals. Now, let's say the Twins decide that they want to go into more of a full-on rebuild. Now you're looking at maybe dealing a Joe Ryan, definitely dealing Duran and Jax, maybe even a Ryan Jeffers. You're starting to look at players that aren't expiring at the end of the year. And especially those top three names, Ryan, Duran, and Jax, those are going to net an incredible return. And that return doesn't have to be players that are going to impact the 2026 roster. To me, if you are dealing, especially Joe Ryan, then you are kind of mailing it in for 2026 and saying that that's going to be a transition year as you wait for Emmanuel Rodriguez, Walker Jenkins, Corey Lewis, some of those guys who are at the AAA, AA levels to continue developing. You're pushing out that window more than just 1 year, probably looking at 2 years, maybe even 3 years into 2028. And so if the Twins decide to go that route where they are doing a little bit more of a rebuild, they're not going to trade Pablo Lopez. His value is too low right now. Same thing with Carlos Correa. Byron Buxton has a no trade clause that he's not going to waive. And so Joe Ryan is the key piece. And so what I would be looking for in return for Joe Ryan or even a Duran or a Jax is a top prospect and multiple top prospects, but not ones that are in, the low A, single A, high A level. I'd be wanting to look for prospects that are more in the AA, AAA, something where you can see those returns here in the next 2 to 3 years is what I would be looking for the Twins to be successful if they do decide to deal Joe Ryan, Griffin Jax, and Joan Duran and push out that competitive window to 2027, 2028. That's just my opinion on how the Twins can be successful no matter what route they go. Let me know what you think in the comments, and of course, tune into twinsdaily.com for more trade deadline coverage.